fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I got another Patreon request. This is for jamaral81, and he wanted me to go over a film I've never actually seen before, but have always known about, have always wanted to see. That is George Romero's Martin from 1978. Some people will say 76 or 77. It was shot in 76, but not released until 78. Yeah, my eye looks a little weird. I think I had some sort of reaction to something. I don't know what it is. It's kind of annoying. This is a movie that's actually been kind of hard to find because it was produced by Richard Rubinstein, who also produced Dawn of the Dead. And he still owns the rights to both films. And it's always been hard to get releases from him. That's why Dawn of the Dead has lots of different releases, but sort of hard to get after a while. Martin was on VHS, and it had an Anchor Bay DVD back in the early 2000s. Then there was another DVD shortly after, but the aspect ratio was wrong. Now, aspect ratio I can see being a pain in the ass. But it's when you get some that are like, well, does it have the octuple HD layer with the proper Yu-Gi-Oh binary encoding encryptions? Why? Because it might as well be a bootleg. I can do better in encryption encoding on a hubcap. Can ya, pal? Just buy the fucking thing. Who cares? If it's not 5K, it might as well be a silent film. You know, those kind of snobby people. It was known internationally as Vampire, spelled with a W. And it stars John Amplas as Martin. Now, John Amplas would go on to work with George Romero again in Dawn of the Dead. He wore makeup to be a Puerto Rican on the roof shootout. And he would be in Creepshow as the corpse of Nathan Grantham in the Father's Day segment. Also stars Lincoln Matsell and Tom Savini, which it was the third film Tom Savini did effects for. His first film was Death Dream by Bob Clark, and then I can never remember the name of it, but he did a film for Alan Ormsby, who worked with Bob Clark frequently back then. This was his third film, and this was the first one that him and Romero worked together on. This started their friendship and a work relationship. Sorry I'm stuttering so bad today. And it's funny in this role because I've known about Tom Savini for probably over 15 years, seen him in documentaries, other movies. I've never seen him without a mustache. And in this I have. I thought that was kind of cool. And this is a very different vampire film that I very much enjoy. It's sort of a modern take on like a vampire film, mixed in with George Romero's sort of, you know, how he gets that skepticism or cynicism of people and the world. Mixed in with that, this is probably the closest to a character study that he's done, because this to vampire films is more like what Maniac is to slasher films. And John Amplas does a very good job. He was kind of young too. I didn't want to click on that. 19 49. Okay, so he was like 26, 27 years old when he did this, so fairly young. He does a great job at, even though he's doing these awful things, he has a very sympathetic, very pathetic kind of performance, and he does pull the whole film. He really carries the whole film himself. It's basically him. He's on this train. He gets off the train with this older gentleman, I think with a German accent. He keeps calling him Nosferatu, played by Lincoln Metzel, who tells them, we find out that they're cousins. He takes Martin to his house and he says, okay, I know you're a vampire, but you're staying in my house. You have to come in my room. You have to talk to my daughter, but she's going to talk to you anyway. I will find a way to cleanse your soul, and then I will destroy you. By the way, you have to go work at my store starting on Monday. So it's got that great George Romero dialogue. Of course, they can speak a lot better than I can. Can actually spit words out. Dumbass. And it even opens up with, okay, he's a vampire, but this is 1978. I mean, Hammer just got done with their Dracula run. It was the year before the Frank Langella Dracula. We never had a vampire movie quite like this. He doesn't have fangs. He's not in like a cape. It's not like a gothic setting. It's George Romero, so it's set in Pittsburgh, but he's a regular looking kid. He can go out in the sun. He's not affected by garlic or a cross or anything. His uncle they should have just made him his uncle. I don't know why they said cousins, because he's like 60 or 70 and he's in his 20s. But he even tells him, like, there's no magic to this. It's like, I just have a bloodthirst. And it never really comes out and says he's a vampire. There's even evidence to back up maybe he's not a vampire. And supposedly he's 84 years old. He's an 84-year-old vampire, sort of, in the guise of like a 26-year-old. Because you can look at this in two different ways, because at the beginning of the film, while he's on the train, we see how he operates. He sneaks up on these women. He has a syringe. He doesn't really want to hurt them, so he gives them a shot, puts them to sleep. He then slits their wrist while they're sleeping, and then he drinks their blood. He lays with them naked. At first I was like, why is that needed? But throughout the film, he calls into this radio station. He calls himself the Count. And he talks about being a real life vampire. And it gets into talking about, he calls it doing the sexy stuff. I would like to do the sexy stuff without the blood, or while they're awake. But another way you could look at this is we get these black and white visions as well. Like the woman on the train, before he goes into her cabin, he's got the syringe in his mouth, and we see a black and white vision of him, sort of in like the unbuttoned, loose-fitting white shirt from like a romantic novel or something. And it's like this romanticized version of how a vampire would sort of seduce and kill and drink from a woman. But then when he gets in her room, we hear like the toilet flush. She's got a face mask. She's blowing her nose. Total opposite of romantic. Which I think it was Romero's intent, but that's his way of also putting his kind of off-color sense of humor in there. But we get these black and white visions throughout the film. Whether it be when his cousin is talking to him, or, you know, when he does go to kill someone else, or when he's being chased. And it does look like 1800s sort of him being chased. Like, we see this old-timey version of what's going on. And it could be looked at, is that a flashback from so many years ago? Is this sort of how he sees himself? Is this what he wants to be? Is this what he's been conditioned to think? Because we also get the idea that this family has had a vampire curse for so many generations. Which, if you go that route, it makes the film even more sad and sympathetic. Because Martin is already a very sad, pathetic character to begin with. And why do I keep forgetting his last name? What the hell is wrong with me today? John Amplas. He plays him in such a sad way that you kind of can't help but sympathize with him. I mean, if you don't, I get it, but like, he's been told his whole life that you're cursed, you're a vampire, we've all been vampires, you're cursed, you have to drink blood. That's how you live, you have to do it. And, you know, the film does, I guess, work both ways. It can be a vampire film, it can just be someone with some sort of mental illness, believes he's a vampire. And I really enjoyed this film. Almost over 10 minutes in, I haven't even given my opinion yet. Jamaral81, I apologize. I meant to do this review last night, because that's when I watched it. And then shit came up, and I'm trying to do it my best from memory now. And basically, there's no real plot, I guess. It's basically just seeing Martin in his day-to-day life. He works at the grocery store, some sort of grocery store or market that his cousin works at or runs. He befriends this one, I don't know if she's divorced or widowed, I don't remember. This lonely housewife, I guess. Or maybe she's still married, I don't know. And she gets kind of flirty with him, but he's very standoffish of her, but they're still friends. Him going out on the vampire hunt, and then him calling into that radio station as the Count. That's basically the film. Just seeing him go through all these different things. And I thought he did a good job because for the most part, he is very sympathetic. Like, one of the first scenes we see when he gets to the house, because his cousin is calling him Nosferatu, I will destroy you. He puts garlic up. And he's trying to tell him, like, do you understand? Like, he bites the garlic, spits it out, takes his cross. He's like, it's not magic. Nothing's gonna help you. And he just has this very, like troubled, sad look on him. But then we get sequences, like, he's gonna go into this woman's house, kill her and drink her blood. But it doesn't go as planned because she's having some sort of affair, or some guy's having an affair with her. And the guy was there. And he sort of goes into like Dexter mode. Like he's in all black, which, I mean, Dexter only wore all black in the pilot episode. But you know, he's got like the syringe in his mouth. He's very quick on his feet. There's like kind of very well choreographed and very well edited, which I know that's George Romero's, that's how his films are made. He makes them in the editing room. He shoots them however he can, and then he pieces it together the best way he can while he's editing it. And this film is no exception. Like, it's got the right amount of, like, action, cat and mouse, the editing. Like, he runs in the room, he sees the guy, he, like, jumps across the bed, he, like, stabs the guy with the needle, and then he hits the plunger. And then he's hiding all around the house. The guy's trying to tell the woman to call 911 because he knows he's been stuck with something. She's just being an idiot about the whole thing. What number? What number? And every time she goes to dial a number, he's in another room, got a syringe in his mouth. He's hitting buttons on the phone with unrealistic sound effects for the time period. Oh, this movie's very 70s as well. If you like the way like home deco looks in the 70s, you'll love this movie. So he just messes with them completely with the phone, and like the guy like thinks he went outside, so he walks outside, then Martin locks him outside. No, very sneaky. And even after this, he's talking to the radio station about how things got a lot easier after the needles, and he's very careful. He knows what he's doing now. It was way harder before. And it's a Tom Savini movie as far as effects go, but there's really only 2 really big gags, or 3. Like, yeah, we see him slit the wrist to get the blood, and it's that very thick, vibrant red, like, tomato paste blood you've seen like Dawn of the Dead or Italian films. But when that guy's outside, he locks the guy outside. There is a big gag where, you know, he tracks him down outside, knocks him out. And he's like, "You're supposed to be here." And he sticks a stick in his throat. He just pushes it in there. And you can tell it's an early Tom Savini effect. It doesn't look as good as something like even as early as Dawn of the Dead or Friday the 13th. It's basically the same effect, but in reverse of like the Kevin Bacon arrow through the neck. You tell the guy's head is actually here, and then it's the dummy prosthetic. Yeah, he talks about, you know, eventually wanting to do the sexy stuff while awake and without the blood. Eventually he does have sex with the housewife that he's friends with. And we get the idea that she's really depressed. You know, she can't have kids. She's alcoholic. Seems very sad. But not really sad enough for what happens at the end. And also, I think this is the longest role George Romero has had in the film, or at least that I've seen. He has done a couple films that I haven't seen since I was a kid, like Monkey Shines or The Dark Half. I do have Two Evil Eyes, which I haven't seen yet. That's what he did with Dario Argento. But Romero plays a priest in this. and he's not wearing his glasses. He doesn't have facial hair. He doesn't have like a ponytail. Young George Romero, and he's supposed to play like a 70s priest that really is, I guess, more modern, because he's invited over for dinner, and the cousin is asking him, like, do you believe in demons and vampires? Do you believe the devil can possess people? Like, all this very, like, old, ancient beliefs. And Romero's kind of laughing it off, and he even talks about The Exorcist, and even says, well, why don't you go talk to this older priest? He probably knows more about what you're talking about. And I think Romero does a good job with his role. It's great to see him in a role like that. It's mostly cameos, but I really miss Romero. It really sucks that the kind of director he was and the kind of films he made, really unorthodox, independent, but always enjoyable, always became, huge horror titles. But then towards the end of his life, he couldn't really get films made. Like, he didn't even get to make Land of the Dead until Zack Snyder made the Dawn of the Dead remake. Like, remakes and rip-offs of Romero got made, but every time he was like, well, I got this other film I want to do, and they're like, give us another Dead film, then maybe you can do your other stupid film that you want to do that will never greenlight. And it sucks that that's how his career ended. It's really sad, but I've always loved George Romero, so it's great to see him in a role like this. He also wrote this film. He gets to do a role where he gets to crack jokes. He's laughing. It's just really good. And another thing about this movie is it really has just a bleak feeling to it. Like, it just has this 70s grit and grain to it. Like, it kind of reminded me of like the 90s movie Kids, like 1995's Kids. Imagine if something like that was made in the 70s, like sort of just like that gritty kind of independent film following those kind of troubled kids, but now we're following this kind of troubled kid. Kind of reminded me of that. The music, who was done by, it wasn't done by Goblin. It was done by Donald Rubinstein, who I believe is the producer's brother. Yeah. It has a very, it has a somber tone, sort of like a soft, somber tone, but also like a gothy church sound over it. Like that perfect blend of like vampire music, but in like a modern, bleaky area. And Romero really utilizes his atmosphere, because there's a lot of scenes where Martin is just walking around, and while films like Dracula will show like the moon and the clouds, the fog and the cemetery and the gates and the trees, to really immerse ourselves in like that Transylvanian atmosphere. Martin, when he's walking around Pittsburgh, I mean, he'll walk by like a junkyard and we'll just see the machines crush the cars. He walks by these like abandoned buildings, and we see birds like landing on the windowsills of the window. we just get to look at this really like depressed 70s area. It does kind of make it like a modern day Transylvania. I think he did a great job with that as well. It's one of his more atmospheric films, apart from the first three Dead films, for sure. I would definitely say this is his more criminally underseen and underrated film. And just with all this depressing stuff, like Martin's performance, you know, how he is this sympathetic figure despite what he's doing. The way it ends is really, even more depressing. Because he goes to, spoilers, but he goes to visit the housewife again. And he sees that she has slit her wrist in the bathtub. And I don't think he drinks her blood. I don't remember if he does. I don't think he does. But like even before this, there was like a big chase with the police through these buildings. I think he killed like 2 homeless guys. He was able to get away. And in the beginning of the film, his cousin told him when he's like, you know, you don't ever go in my room, you don't ever go in my daughter's room. Which his daughter was actually played by Christine Forrest, who would go on to marry George Romero. I think... I don't think they were married at this time. Christine Forrest... No. 1980 to 2010. It was his long-time marriage. But she was also in the, she worked in the radio station in Dawn of the Dead, the opening, which Romero was also in. So that's his cousin's granddaughter, who's also his younger cousin, who's very nice to Martin. But when he's giving him his spiel at the beginning of the film about how I'll destroy you, he says, you know, you will never kill anyone in our town, in our city. I will find out about it, and I'll destroy you without salvation, without blessing your soul. And his cousin finds out about that housewife, and he knows that they've been friends. So Martin kind of wakes up one morning, and his cousin has a stake over him, and he's like, you expect me to believe that you didn't kill her? I mean, her wrist was slit. It looked like everything that you do. And of course, Martin didn't do it, and he can't really explain himself, and then he just takes the hammer and he... I mean, very kind of cheap effect. You can see how it's done, but I like how like when he hits it, the blood, I thought it was done well. And that's the end of the movie. You know, it's sort of kind of pans in on Martin as he's laying in the bed, dead, with blood all over him. Because that was another thing I noticed. This movie does have very erotic moments as well. Because we get the idea that this is playing on the whole sexual themes and eroticism behind vampires. So, like, when he's in the train in the beginning of the film, and he holds that woman's arm up, and he slits her wrist, the way it, like, the way his face is, and the way it hits his face and his chest, kind of looks like a money shot. I know that was intentional. So, there's just stuff like that sprinkled all throughout the film. Whether it be the eroticism and... But I do... One of the more interesting things I find about this film is how it is truly ambiguous as to whether he's a vampire or not, or whether he truly feels that he is. And some people will say how this is one of the more true vampire movies because of like serial killers that we've had in real life that thought they were vampires or were called vampires. And it's like, well, it's a little different. It's not quite a Richard Chase kind of case, but I liked everything about this film. I liked the performances, especially by its lead. It was great to see George Romero in a longer role. It was great to see Tom Savini, a young Tom Savini, especially without a mustache. See one of his earlier effects credits. The atmosphere of this film, it does feel like just Clerks, but I don't know why, like movies like Clerks and Kids. I know Jay and one of the other guys from Red Letter Media did a review of this, and they said that it felt like a Richard Linklater vampire film, and I do agree. It is kind of like, like Slacker or something, but in the 70s and about a vampire, and just about a very grounded, modern youth vampire. And I mean, there's a lot of original vampire movies out there, and this one stands out to me the most, probably for that reason. I mean, even just here beside me in a stack of new movies, whether it's any of the Draculas, Nosferatu, which is a Dracula movie, or Fright Night, or Dog Soldiers, or Salem's Lot, Lost Boys, From Dusk Till Dawn, Let Me In or Let the Right One In. There's a ton of different vampire movies out there, but this one's very different. Just in tone, atmosphere, performance, just overall, no fangs, how he has to actually get the blood out and doesn't just bite and suck it out. I don't know, this film felt definitely more of an intimate character study than other vampire films, other George Romero films. I thought the score fit perfectly with it, and I'm really glad jamaral81 requested this. It's for free on YouTube, so definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. I've always wanted to see it, and I never got around to it. And I think it's because its availability on DVD can be kind of scarce. But my top two favorite George Romero films have always been Creepshow and Night of the Living Dead. And then probably, Dawn and Day would probably be up there. But this is definitely up there as well. It's different for him. It's still got his cynical view of the world. Even the lines like, there's no real magic, or there's no such thing as magic. It's not as full-blown cynical as, say, Day of the Dead or Land of the Dead. As far as just view of the world and people, this one would definitely be more skeptical, I guess, of life in the world. But with some of that Romero humor. And the Romero humor is like the scenes where he has like the romanticized vision of the woman. But when he gets in her room, it's like the toilet flushing, blowing her nose. Or Romero's character himself, which was great to see. Yeah, I mostly just repeat myself now, but there's a lot to like about this film. I really enjoyed it. Fucking thing. George Romero's Martin. Thanks for watching.